তন্ময়, আর ইউ দেয়ার?
হ্যাঁ দিদি।
আচ্ছা, আমি যদি ইয়েটা পাঠাই, তুই শেয়ার করতে পারবি?
হ্যাঁ, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই।
আমি একটা পাওয়ার পয়েন্ট শেয়ার করছিলাম আর কি। আচ্ছা, জাস্ট লেট মি জাস্ট সি ইফ আই
ওকে,
ক্যান শেয়ার ইট
তোমার
ফ্রম
ওখানে
হিয়ার।
হচ্ছে না?
হ্যাঁ, সরি,
তোমার ওখান থেকে হচ্ছে না?
এক মিনিট।
বলছি তোমার ওখান থেকে হচ্ছে না, প্রবলেম হচ্ছে?
আমি দেখছি।
দাঁড়াও, এখানে সেটিংস আমি দেখছি।
উম, কি
এখানে
বললাম?
শেয়ার বাটনটা ওই মনে হয় শেয়ার হচ্ছে না। অনেক সময় গুগল মিটে প্রবলেমটা হয়, শেয়ার করা যায় না।
আচ্ছা, তাহলে তো কি করা?
তুমি আমাকে পাঠিয়ে পাঠিয়ে দাও তাহলে।
আমি পাঠাচ্ছি, এক মিনিট।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ।
Tanmay, I have sent you the blue this PowerPoint through WhatsApp.
হ্যাঁ দিদি, পেয়েছি।
শেয়ার করতে পারবি?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ।
আচ্ছা, ঠিক আছে, then I can start with the thing.
শেয়ার হয়েছে?
প্রথম হচ্ছিল, এখন তো I can see my screen being shared. Yeah, this is how. Yeah, হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, হচ্ছে। Okay. So as you can see that here, let me begin with two important quotes delivered by, the first one is by definitely by Mary Wollstonecraft, who says that contending for the rights of women, my main argument is built on the simple principle that if she be not prepared by education to become the companion of man, she will stop the progress of knowledge. For truth must be common to all, and or it will be inefficacious with respect to its influence on general practice. Because there was so much of opposition, uh, as I'm trying to tell you about the contextual realities of her times, when Mary Wollstonecraft was writing this particular polemic, when she was writing this treatise on education, about female education, there was so much opposition. There was so much of a kind of a sense of hostility towards women education generally. especially this kind of structured education which is women were supposed to have. And there was a lot of opposition, there was a lot of debate, and a lot of overall, the entire atmosphere or the entire society was not ready for a woman to be educated in the proper sense of the term. There was no harm in getting her educated, when it comes to domestic virtues, when it comes to domestic work, other kinds of things, which would perhaps add a kind of a sense of refinement to her character. But the real kind of pursuit of knowledge, the kind of education that is being imparted or delivered in a school or a college or a university, was not something which was meant for a woman to receive. So that was the general kind of a perception, or a general sense of a feeling amongst the larger public. And people were not prepared, and especially because it was deeply, even now things have not, it's not that things have changed a lot, but then we have come a long way. But then the kind of patriarchal mindset that was at work, it would not allow, or it would not really welcome this kind of changes, that a woman would be sent to a school and she would be receiving classical education, she would be receiving education in terms of maths or literature or humanities and philosophy and different other disciplines, and she will be actually somebody who would be at par with a man. That was something which was quite unthinkable and unacceptable. Much later, around a century later, not even more than that, more than a century later, we find that her Virginia Woolf, uh, if you have read her A Room of One's Own, which is a fantastic, brilliant work about a woman's need to have a private space of her own, to pursue writing, and also financial independence, to live an independent life, where she's continuously, Virginia Woolf, you'll see that in A Room of One's Own, she is arguing for a proper niche or a proper foothold for a woman to flourish, to express herself. She also says the same thing. She says the history of man's opposition to women's emancipation is more. You just note the statement. The history of man's opposition to women's emancipation is more interesting, perhaps, than the story of that emancipation itself. Yes, definitely. It was not really a welcome change. And when, Mary Wollstonecraft emerged in the scene, when she had published, before that she had published Vindication of the Rights of Man. But this was something, Vindication of the Rights of Women was a second vindication, the second work on vindication. But then, the kind of views which she had inserted and incorporated, the kind of arguments that she is laying before us, that was seen as a kind of a very immodest emergence of a woman's voice. It was not really something which was taken very charitably or accepted with grace. No, she had to face a lot of wrath for that, public wrath for that, and she would be critiqued and criticized for writing this kind of stuff. But that did not really deter her from writing, because you'll find that how she is, and when it comes to situating Mary Wollstonecraft in the larger map of feminist movement or feminist writings, you'll see that she is more of a equality, more on the somebody who spoke about equality feminism. Later on, you'll find that there are so many feminist thinkers. I mean, we have, if you look at the history of feminism, we have different waves of feminism fighting for political rights, starting with the suffragette movement, where women wanted to the voting right. And later on, the second wave and third wave, radical feminism, even now post feminism as it is called. You'll find that how there are different ways of looking at feminist ideas and feminist rights. But if you look at Mary Wollstonecraft, she was somebody who was actually fighting for the equality of women, and she thought that she identified that women's world and man's world are different. But at the same time, this should not be a cause, or this should not be a justification for denying women to receive education, to flourish in life, to develop her own intellectual capabilities. So she was fighting, in a very, very forceful manner, especially through her writings. During that time, perhaps the kind of activism which had emerged much later, especially during the suffragette movement, where women would take to the streets, they would be marching in protest, they would be joining processions, and much later also different kinds of women's rights movement. For in During Mary Wollstonecraft time, it was unthinkable uh, for a woman to take to the streets or hit the streets and join and raise slogans. It was not really something which was viable and feasible, but in her own silent ways, she was in her own individual capacity, she was actually fighting for women's rights. Now, Tanmaya, please, would you please change the slide, the next slide, please? Yeah. As you can see that vindication of the rights of women is seen to be a founding text of feminist thought and understanding, and it is one, perhaps it is also seen to be the kind of the bible of of feminist thought and feminist understanding and feminist criticism. Because later we know that there were different kinds of responses to vindication. Some of these feminist thinkers, they said that it is something which does not really serve the cause of feminist movement. There are different kinds of views. Some very negative views have also emerged, but by and large you'll find that it actually that Virginia Woolf came much later, and in her work also Virginia Woolf has acknowledged and also mentioned Mary Wollstonecraft's works and Mary Wollstonecraft's contribution in the field. So her contribution can never be undermined, and it needs to be acknowledged, it needs to be appreciated. During that time, you also have to note that during the time when she was writing, it was a time which was very electrifying, which was very filled with a lot of tension, political tension, social tension, because a few years prior to that, American War of Independence had happened, and during the time when she was writing, French Revolution was taking place. So there was a transition, even historically, there was a transition from monarchy to democratic forms of government. There was overthrowing of the government, and a lot of violence had also taken place, especially in terms of French Revolution. And there was a lot of transnational, intercontinental exchanges of ideas were happening, because one revolution would definitely inspire the other, and different countries, different nations during that, especially European nations, the continental different nations and countries, they were exchanging ideas through pamphlets, through exchange of letters, through journalistic writings, and a huge flurry of exchanges of ideas were taking place. So her place or her views can be seen as a kind of a part of this larger exchange of global conversation or intercontinental conversation, because we know that during French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity. This became a kind of a chanting mantra during that time, laying emphasis upon the democratic rights of human beings, human rights. So people were talking about, especially the male thinkers, they were talking about human rights. They were talking about the need of need to have human rights, need to have individual autonomy, the need to have individual capacity to build a nation, and not really depend upon the monarchy system of governance where the king is or the queen is all in all. But then overall larger participation of people in deciding the fate of a nation, and French Revolution was an example in this regard. So a lot of other social reformers and thinkers and critics, they were also debating upon the nature of education. What should be the nature of education? In what mode individuals should be educated, and what should be the content of education. So these were part of the discourses. Now Mary Wollstonecraft, She was, since she belonged to that circle. Now let me just briefly, very briefly talk about her personal life, because personal life also is important in understanding her overall politics and overall situatedness of Mary Wollstonecraft. She grew up in a very uh, unstable kind of a family setup, very I would not say traumatic, but at the same time her father would be was an alcoholic, and also somebody who did not have any steady income. He would be moving from the family would be constantly on the move. She was the second child, and they would not be settled in one particular place, so they would be constantly changing location, and the father would be changing, spending so much money. Whatever money the father had got, he had spent them in setting up different kinds of business, but then the business never succeeded, it failed always. And then he would move to another place, and the family had to move. So it was not really a very happy kind of a childhood which Mary Wollstonecraft was leading. And but she was, as a child, she was drawn towards books. She loved academics. She was an autodidact, somebody who was teaching herself through her own initiative, through her own kind of willingness. She wanted to read, and she was into writing from a very early age. She wanted to write, and somebody who had decided when she was 16 years old, she had decided that she is not going to marry. I mean, that was she had not even reached her proper adulthood, but that before that only she decided that she is not, because perhaps she saw her own family suffer, and she was the one who would be protecting her mother, defending her mother, protecting her mother every night. When the father would be drunk, in a state of drunkenness, the father would want to, in a state of rage perhaps, he would be wanting to abuse his wife, beat up his wife. She would be the one who would play the role of the savior. And in a later part of her life, she is the one who had actually, in one of her sisters who was in an abusive marriage, she had encouraged her to leave her husband and move along with her. So she was, in some ways, she was a pioneer, somebody who was very courageous, a very bold woman. And she was also sustaining her family. You'll see that she, at a particular point of time, she was the breadwinner in the family. She would be sending money through her writing, whatever she settled at one point of time. She settled in London, and she worked for a publishing house under the mentorship of Joseph Johnson, who was also a radical thinker during the times. So she was in the midst of, in the thick of all these different kinds of controversies, different kinds of debates. And because she was in a publishing industry, it was not a very common and ordinary thing for a woman to join publishing house and work for a publishing house, write journalistic accounts or newspaper accounts, and also writing travel writings. She experimented in different kinds of literary genre. It's not that she was writing only essays. She was writing different forms of kinds of narratives. So you will find that through her life only we find that. And she was leading a very unconventional, non-conformist kind of a life. At one point of time, when she went to France, when there was this French Revolution was happening, and there was so much of political turmoil in Paris, she was there, witnessing everything and absorbing everything. And that was a point of time when she had entered into a relationship with George Imlay, which was a much infamous kind of a relationship. And for that, you know perhaps more than her literary works, we'll find that after her death, which was a very premature death, she died very early when she was hardly 38 years old. She died. So you'll find that because of her relationship with George Imlay, and she became pregnant. It was she had given birth to a child out of wedlock, and then she came back, and you'll find that, and she was looking after her daughter and also working. And then finally, she got married. Somebody who was so anti-marriage, she got married much later in her life. With She got married with William Godwin. And we know that, more than perhaps Mary Wollstonecraft, her daughter is somebody who is being celebrated as a very famous writer. Who is the daughter? Who we or many of us have read her work.
Mary Shelley, ma'am.
Wollstonecraft daughter.
Mary
Yes.
Shelley.
Mary Shelley.
Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely right. So we know more about her work than perhaps Wollstonecraft work. So we'll find that, and especially after her death, when Mary Godwin was born, around 10 days after the childbirth, she developed septic and, an infection, which was, during that time, it was incurable, and she succumbed to death. After her death, her husband, Mr. Godwin, had published a memoir. Instead of, doing service to her career, it brought a lot of discredit to her reputation as a writer, because of the kind of her personal affairs and personal relationships which were being offered before the public, which were being published. And people had did not take it very kindly. People did not really receive it in a kind manner, and she was brought under a lot of public speculation and criticism. And somehow, the kind of perhaps the kind of reception which a vindication of the rights of women should have received after her death in the subsequent times, in the subsequent decades, it did not really gain that kind of favor, that kind of readership, because of her, the personal life, and the reports concerning her personal life overshadowed everything, which is very sad. And so we find that how, coming back to the war, coming back to Mary Wollstonecraft's vindication of the rights, we'll find that how she has dedicated the book to, as you can see in the slide, she dedicated the book to Talleyrand. Talleyrand was somebody who was formulating, just as we have, a national education policy, so many discussions, so many webinars are being held throughout India, so many conferences are being held as to how this can be implemented. So Talleyrand was somebody who was a key person who was formulating education policy, and it was supposed to be placed for France, and it was supposed to be placed before French assembly. And Mary Wollstonecraft, when she received this entire draft, she was deeply, worried and deeply anxious to see the kind of discrimination that was being placed about, or that was being incorporated in the drafting, in the formulation of education policy, which had a very different kind of a privilege, or different kind of a benefit or advantage given to the delivered to the male members as compared to the female members. So that is something. Before that, she had written Vindication of the Rights of Man, which was in response to Edmund Burke's reflections on revolution in France, where Edmund Burke, again a very important thinker during her times, who had talked about French Revolution, and who had criticized French Revolution for its kind of violence, for its spirit of violence, and disregard for rules and civility. Because he was a conservationist, and he thought that revolution should not be brought forth in this manner. So Mary Wollstonecraft, she jumped into the scene, and she defended, and she said that if violence is necessary, or if a revolution is necessary to bring forth, or to implement human rights, then so be it. And it's not that, only conforming to the rules and conforming to the laws can bring a better society. It is important to exercise one's own human rights, to exercise human agency, to have a better equal society, to have a better productive society, a more developed society on the basis of equality. So she was talking about human rights, she was talking about the defense of human rights, and whatever methods are being employed in response to Edmund Burke in in vindication of the rights of man. In the case of a vindication of the rights of women, her main concern is about women's education and how women becomes a part of conditioning, larger conditioning, and how different stereotypes are being constructed. We know that through our reading of literature, through our as we watch films, as we watch different kinds of series, as we read different literary stories, we know that how different stereotypes are being constructed, and very often the literary writings and films and cultural narratives, they challenge that stereotypes. So Mary Wollstonecraft was also keen on breaking those stereotypes, and she wanted to prove that women are equally capable. It's not that women are incapable, women are equally capable, and they should be given, the kind of exact amount of privilege or the exact amount of entitlement as a man gets in his life through education. So, can we move to the next slide, Tonmoy? Mm, uh, so we find that how the core question which she is asking is that why women should be looked upon as weaker, maternal, and inherently lesser sex. So this is her fundamental question, because there is a kind of a given. It is already a kind of a given. A construct has already been established in the society and public perception, and it is not something which just happened during the 18th century or 17th century. It happened through the progression of human civilization. I'm not going into all these details, but then we know that how, because of the operation of patriarchal set of society or patriarchal mindset, we find that it's not about, male bashing. But it's about a particular kind of politics, that is the kind of patriarchy that promotes or that perpetuates a kind of a vision or a view about a woman, that women are meant to do this kind of work. A woman is weak, biologically she is weak. Mary Wollstonecraft says that yes, biologically we are different. It's not that we are not different. We are different. A woman's anatomy is different. Her physiology is different. But at the same time, why it should be that since she is biologically different, perhaps, physically men are stronger, but that doesn't mean that, intellectually also women cannot go at par with men. And why this should be the reason that her physical difference should also be a reason for justifying that her intellect is also inferior, because there were different kind of formulations that woman's brain is weak, her brain is small, and that's why her thinking capability is less, it's shrunken. So she wanted to challenge those assumptions. And she says that, as civilization has progressed, since these have been in place, so, ultimately it's part of the larger conditioning. Why a woman? Here I'm reminded of, it's not just that only, a few people or few male thinkers were thinking thus. If you have read Nathaniel Hawthorne, Scarlet Letter, who in Scarlet Letter, he's an American author, Nathaniel Hawthorne. I'll be in the course of my classroom discussion. I draw upon examples. So this is another example that I wanted to give you. That's about Nathaniel Hawthorne, who had written the Scarlet Letter. Anybody, have you read the Scarlet Letter by any chance? Yes, students. Scarlet Letter. It's a novel by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No,
Okay,
ma'am.
it's an interesting novel. Okay, Shreya says no, ma'am. Okay, it's an interesting. I'm not going to give you, because otherwise I'll be digressing and we have to finish the class. But then it's a story which also tells us about an adulteress uh, who uh, who uh, uh, who is being viewed as somebody who has established a relationship beyond her marriage, and she has a child, and that's the reason why she is being castigated in the society. She is being banished from her society, and Scarlet Letter, she is doomed to wear a kind of an emblem of shame, a letter A. And Scarlet, red, it stands for adultery, it stands for shame. So she is supposed to wear this because she would be seen as somebody who is a transgressor, somebody who is a rule breaker, rule bender, and she is not supposed to live in the mainstream society. So she has to leave. She is being verdict is being pronounced upon her, and she, along with her daughter, they live outside the periphery of the society. Now, in that story, Nathaniel Hawthorne actually, builds up a character, that is the name of the woman who is doomed to wear that Scarlet Letter A. Her name is Hester Prynne, and we find that how ultimately Hester Prynne, through her resilience, through her hard work, through her presence, through her benevolence, she wins the heart of the people, and she moves away from that from the definition of shame, from the definition of adultery, to somebody who is seen as a victorious woman. Now, somebody, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who had actually presented women in such a showing her struggle, showing her resilience, and showing her emerging as a kind of a victorious woman. He was celebrating womanhood in through his works. But in his real life, as I say, that it's a kind of a patriarchy, the kind of conditioning, the kind of understanding that women are inferior and women are meant for particular kind of a labor and particular kind of work. He said that in his personal essay, where he says that a woman, should not be holding pen. She should be rather holding, needles, and she would be knitting, and she should be embroidering instead of writing. Her task is to knit, her task is to cook. A needle looks better, much better than a pen in the fingers of a woman. That was his contention. So we find that how women were being confined to the domestic space, and what kind of role playing women had to play and to participate. And always there had to be a kind of a distinction between a woman's role and a man's role. So this is where she is hitting hard. Mary Wollstonecraft, she is hitting hard at that point. She's saying that no, definitely, women might be having her own kind of work, but that should not be the cause where she should be denied. She should not be denied education. She should be given education. She should be, and then, there should be a kind of an equality of paradigm, where a man also joins a school and receives education. Woman also joins school and she receives education. And on the basis of their capability, it would be seen that who has received and has been able to absorb better way education. Now, at the beginning, if at the very foundation you are denying woman, how can she receive education? If you are not allowing her, then how can there be a change? There cannot be a change. There cannot be an overall civilizational change. So this is her plea, this is her appeal before the public, and also before all the policy makers and formulators and people who are responsible for formulating education. So we find that how she is taking on, and she is contending, she is contesting different views. She is telling us about how there should be equality, and how the stereotypes should be challenged and this should be broken. And there should be it's high time that we came out of all this kind of stereotypes and conditioning. Much later, we know that Simone de Beauvoir, I'm sure you have heard about her, who said that a woman is not born, she is made. How through different discriminatory practices, through different kinds of conditioning, through different kinds of perceptions, a woman is when a woman in she is how she it's not about the sexual difference, it's also about the role which a woman plays. So she had made this very important, remarkable statement that a woman is not born, she is made. Society makes her a woman. So that's why, you have a woman is supposed to love this color, she's supposed to wear this kind of colors. A woman should be wearing pink, and a man should be wearing, other, all kinds of color politics. A woman should be publicly, she might display emotion. Men, they are not supposed to display emotions, they are not supposed to, men don't cry in public, men are not supposed to cry at all. So all these different kinds of role playing and performativity, you can say, these are the things which are part of larger social codes, larger social norms, which are imposed right from the familial part, right from the time a woman is born, or a man is born. So just as a woman is supposed to given certain roles to play, a man is also supposed to give. A woman should only play with dolls, a woman should not venture out and go for too much of outdoor games. In a similar way, a male child, he should be into sports, and he should be adventure sports, and he should be doing all these things, and he should not be stay at home, and he should not be cooking. So all these, domestic chores, how they are being constantly segregated. So this part of the labor is male labor, this part of the labor is women labor, and a woman is supposed to do this work, a man is supposed to do that work. So all these things or were already there. I mean, definitely during Mary Wollstonecraft's time, it was there. It was a time when most of the property, she was born to a time, to an England, where the property of a woman was the property of the husband. It's the a wife cannot have property. The husband has to have the property, and divorce was something which was unthinkable. A woman who wanted to come out of her marriage, it was really something which was seen as transgression. But even then, if she came out of her marriage, she would not have the custody of her children. So because the children would be the sole claim, or the right to children's life would be upon the father. And marital rape, even that marital rape was not something which was not even acknowledged. I mean, it was not really defined, so it was something which was rampant, which was prevalent, but then it was not acknowledged, it was not seen as marital rape. So we find that during the time when she was born, uh, these were already there. So she was speaking against all these discriminations, she was speaking against all these problems. Yes, Tonmoy, can we have the next slide, please? Now, coming to chapter 5, you'll see that she starts right from chapter 1, from introduction, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. She's telling us about justifying, she's arguing. It's very persuasive. If you look at the tone of the narrative, it's very, very persuasive. And she's telling us about how, uh, a woman should be allowed, and why is it that her only emphasis should be upon moral virtues, and why is it that a woman is supposed to be the main person responsible to uphold chastity, physical chastity, and also moral uprightness, and she should be behaving in a particular manner. She's questioning all these things. And in this chapter 5, you'll find that how she picks up different authors who had written about women's education, and she's contesting, she's arguing against them. The first author who she takes up in the course of chapter 5 is Rousseau, who is a French thinker and philosopher. And we know about, somebody who is critically acclaimed thinker, who has made immense contribution to the field of political science and political philosophy. Now, he had actually written a kind of a treatise on education called Emily, or treatise on education, and it's seen as a one of the most foremost, writings on the nature of education. Now, everything said and done, she reads and she says, Wollstonecraft's contention is that you have got it all wrong. Mr. Rousseau, you have got it all wrong. I mean, because Mr. Rousseau, according to her, he has said that he makes a kind of a distinct difference between women's education and the objective of women's education and the objective of men's education. According to him, women should always be receiving domestic education, and man should be the recipient of public education. And she should be always relative to the man. She would come in a secondary position, because in Emily, Rousseau had talked about how a male child, as he grows up, how he should be receiving lessons, and how in the society has a kind of a corrupt influence, but then he should overcome, and then he should train his mind, his creative faculty, his intellectual faculty. And he also talks about female education. Emily is the Emilas is the male character, and then you have Sophie, who is the female character. And Sophie's education, he also talks at length about Sophie's education. And according to Rousseau, Sophie should be only learning housework, and her main task in this entire world, Sophie is a representative woman. It's not just about Sophie, it's about all the other women in the world. Their main task uh, is to please men. And so they have to train themselves in such a way, they have to groom themselves in such a way, is to so that a woman, whatever education she receives, she should not be going to the public schools or public institutions, definitely not. She should be at home, it should be homeschooling, and it should be all things related to home. All kinds of sophistication, all kinds of refinement in terms of education should be geared towards making her beautiful, innocent, and silly. Please mark, beautiful, innocent, and silly, as if these are the parameters for educating a woman and rendering her that. So Mary Wollstonecraft is questioning that premise. She's saying that why is it that woman's role should be always in relation to a man, that she should be seen as the wife. And of course, husband would also have his own kind of duties. He should be the protector, he should look after his wife. But then the primary goal of a woman is to be pleasing to the man, because otherwise, a man who is fighting the outside world, who is participating in public affairs at home, he should receive, when he comes back home, there should be calm, there should be peace, and the woman should make all arrangements for that. And she should be coy, she should be shy, she should be innocent. Even if she is not innocent, even if she has greater intellectual capability, she should act innocent, because if she doesn't act innocent, then she is breaking the type, she is breaking her role, she is questioning her role as a woman. So that is Rousseau's prescription, you can say, or Rousseau's advice to the women folk. And that is where Mary Wollstonecraft is questioning that. She says that no, uh, even if you are thinking that a woman should be educated only in terms of domesticity, this should not be the case, because a woman, if she's receiving proper education, she would be the one who would be able to judge between the right and the wrong. Why she should be given a wrong kind of education, and she should be denied, where we don't even know whether she has explored her full possibility or she has explored her full potential. And why should she be made a victim of that kind of conditioning? Because if a woman is always made to feel that, okay, she should look beautiful, so she would be, things have not, as I say, that things have not changed perhaps much. In different formats and different patterns, these things still are at work. A primary objective of a woman is that she should be looking beautiful, and there is always this anxiety that if she's growing old, if there are wrinkles on her skin. And Rousseau also says that, because in the first phase of marriage she will be attractive, and she will please her husband. But later stage, the husband might not really like her physically, there might not be any physical liking for the wife, but then they should just carry along and go along. And she should be the one who should always be morally upright, yes, morally right. And so these are the etc etc, these are the things which Rousseau wants to say. Tonmoy, please, the next slide, please. And then she says, and Rousseau, according to, this is an important point where Rousseau says that women are coy, women are shy, women are innocent, because this is ultimately the law of nature. Wollstonecraft says that no, it's not really the law of nature, it's about a kind of a cause effect phenomenon. Because right from her childhood, she is being made to believe that she is supposed to act shy, she is supposed to only cook, she is supposed to only look after the domestic affairs, and she is not supposed to know more. And if she goes beyond that, she is transgressing, she is breaking the rules, or she is breaking the ethics. So that's why through generations it is being perpetuated, and and it becomes a kind of a majority kind of a behavior. And so that's why it looks as though women are naturally, they are shy, they're naturally, they are coy, they're naturally, they're submissive. No, this is not the case. It's because the society has acted in such a way, things have been placed in such a way that women, they conform to it, and it becomes a larger picture. She also says that definitely the men have physical strength, greater physical strength, but then it doesn't make them superior beings. It's not that they are superior beings because of that. uh, a woman might also participate in physical activities. She should also make herself physically strong. It's not that she should make herself physically frail, and after a point of time, death during childbirth was very common during that time, something which happened to Wollstonecraft herself. And women were, in many cases, because of the fragility of their bodily constitution, they would they would be very prone to sickness and disease. So they should come out of all these things. That was her something which Wollstonecraft wanted to say. And also about marriage, the role, that initially when the marriage happens, she should be the one who should be always entertaining. Another word which really makes her irritated, and something which really causes her anger, is that she should be entertaining to the men folk, so that yes, because of her physical beauty, because of her charm, because of her physical grace, and the kind of behavior which she should be performing, it should be entertaining. And uh, in a marriage, this is something which will make the marriage last long. That was Rousseau's contention. And she says that no, it's not about a woman playing coy, or a woman playing charming, or she's trying to beautify herself. It's about the compatibility of mind. It's more about companionship, it's more about bonding, which should be the basis of foundation of a marriage. So she's questioning the very premise of marriage and the institution of marriage. According to Rousseau, this should be the way a marriage should take place, and this is the way after marriage, the marital relationship should go forward in this particular manner. She says no, it should not go forward in this manner. She's questioning, she's challenging Rousseau. And she says that women should rise above, please note that she should rise above such inadequate models, and strike a balance between head and heart. So it's not about woman, she's only a maternal creature, she motherly feelings comes naturally to her. Yes, fine, it might come naturally to her, but then it doesn't necessarily mean that she should suppress all her other emotions. So there should be a kind of a balance between the head and the heart. So Tanmay, the next slide. Yes, Tanmay, can you hear me? Yes. Now, after Rousseau, you'll see that how she's looking at different and examining different author. The next author who she takes up is again a person who is a clergy person, James Fordyce, and he had written a few sermons to young women about their behavioral codes, about how they should behave, and this is also something which is being critiqued by Wollstonecraft extensively, because she says that these are very essentialist kind of views and they must be rejected at any cost, because Fordyce says that they are timid and they want to be defended. As if women, they always want to be defended, they are want protection always. So Wollstonecraft is hitting hard, and she says no, They are not timid, and it's not that this protectionist rhetoric, it should be done away with. You are playing the knight in the shining armor. We always say, no, that knight in the shining armor, damsel in distress. In different fairy tales, there are so many retellings of fairy tales nowadays. You look at the old fairy tales, Cinderella, or Rapunzel, or Snow White, and even in the Indian context, if you have, Kiranmala and other different characters who are being seen as they are, under some kind of distress, they are in some kind of danger, and then they have to be protected by an able-bodied, prince. In the case of Cinderella, prince. In the case of Snow White, also they are. In the case of Rapunzel, also they have to be saved by them. And so this kind of protectionist, now there is a lot of retelling of the same stories. Disney World has also taken up retelling, and different other versions, literary versions have come up challenging the original story and retelling the story in a different way. It would make for a very interesting discussion, but this is not the crux of our discussion. But what Mary Wollstonecraft is saying is that this kind of protectionist rhetoric should be done away with it, and women should take up the responsibility for themselves, and they can take care of themselves. And if they are being properly educated, they will develop their own rational faculties, they would become more reasonable creature, and they would be out of all these kinds of stereotypes and all these kinds of superstitions, which a woman is supposed to absorb as she grows up, as a young woman, a girl child, as she grows up. The kind of socializing that takes place, that has to be revised, that has to be altered. And she also challenges Fordyce's opinion that women need small degree of knowledge to maintain their appeal to men is deeply problematic. According to Fordyce, he says that even if a woman, knows a little bit of writing, she knows a little bit of reading, that is enough for a man. I mean, a man would not want, women to be very knowledgeable, or he would want somebody who has little bit of knowledge, because otherwise. The appeal would go, the attraction between the sexes would go. That's Fordyce's opinion. So what she says is that let them be taught to respect themselves as rational creatures, and not led to have a passion for their own insipid persons. So, a woman behaving in a particular way, being very coy and being very flirtatious, and being, charming before the man, so that she remains attractive, uh, that is something which she finds deeply problematic. And she also asks, whether should a grave preacher interlard his discourses with such fooleries? So you can see the kind of now language which she is using against Fordyce. She says that, somebody who is delivering sermons, somebody who is such a knowledgeable person, somebody is speaking from such an elevated position, should he be using this kind of terms? Should he be, viewing women in such a negative light? That is her question. And that is how she is challenging also whatever Fordyce is telling us about women and their role. Yeah, Tonmoy, the next slide. Now she takes up the third author who she takes up is Dr. Gregory, who had written a kind of an instructive letter to his daughters. Now, here in this connection, I would also tell you that there were different conduct manuals. In 18th century England, and prior to that also, even in the Victorian century, you'll find that how different conduct manuals were being published. Conduct manuals are kind of a writings, published writings, which would be which were supposed to be the reading stuff meant for women to, women were supposed to read them, so that they know how to become a good wife, a good mother, a good daughter, in terms of moral behavior, in terms of social behavior, in terms of homely, domestic codes, everything. So these were the most important things for a woman to read. She is not supposed to read science, she is not supposed to read geography, she is not supposed to read humanities, but she's the most important thing which she should be well acquainted with is those conduct manuals or the conduct books. So Dr. Gregory's instruction is also in the form of a kind of a conduct manual, where he says that, and she says that these are all misguided, instructions. How can somebody, a father, should be guiding the daughter in such a way? She finds it very problematic, and she finds it that this had to be challenged, and this had to be contested. So one very important thing which Dr. Gregory was propounding or proposing is that even if a woman knows more, suppose a woman knows more, she has learned more, then in the presence of the males, in the presence of men, she should feign ignorance. Because if she is not feigning ignorance, if she is not pretending ignorance, it might evoke unnecessary kind of attention and jealousy. So he's telling his daughters that even if you, in your later life, when you get married, if you see that you know more than your husband, you should never ever ever tell them that you know more, or through your articulations, through your conversations, you are not supposed to tell them that you know more. And Mary Wollstonecraft is finding it, I mean, how can somebody, a father, should sermonize in this way? And she says she feels that this is actually not just insulting the woman, it's also insulting the man. Because by kind of pretending that you know less, that I have not read these books, or I don't know anything about science, I don't know anything about maths, or I don't know anything about geography or physics or whatever other disciplines, you are actually, you are establishing the relationship upon a sense of duplicity, upon a sense of lie. And this should never be the basis of a good relationship, of sound relationship. So she is also questioning Dr. Gregory's sermons, the Dr. Gregory's instructions, and she says that this kind of pretensions and this kind of falsehood should not be the basis of any kind of healthy relationship. And if a woman knows more, let her know more. Why should she feign ignorance? Why should she pretend ignorance? Uh, the next slide, please. So she's also telling us about how throughout human history, that there is this contention and perception that man is a rational creature, man is a rational being, as opposed to women. Not just in terms of the secular understanding, but in terms of, even in terms of biblical understanding, religious understanding, women is always seen as secondary. So she is questioning all this, the validity of such kind of assumptions, such kind of stereotypes. And she says that no resistance has happened till now, that because no, women have not been empowered, women have not been empowered through education, because there is no one, a woman who doesn't know the reality, who has not acquainted herself with real knowledge. How would she contest? How would she question? How would she resist? That's why proper resistance has not occurred. And that's something which she finds very saddening, and she thinks that it's very disturbing also, because civilization, according to her, is never going to move forward if both men and women are not given equal opportunity. And if they are not given equal opportunity, it's going to be always lopsided, it's going to be always partial and discriminatory. And in the course, she also refers to other women writers. And she says that most of these women writers, it's not that during Wollstonecraft time people were writing, women were writing. We know through our reading of literature, many of the women were writing. And she refers to some of these writings and some of these women who had written about education. She refers to Madame D. Genlis, who had written, letters on education. And she's questioning what Madame de Genlis had spoken in Letters on Education, where she says that blind submission to parental authority. and she says that why should be there be blind submission to parental authority. Wollstonecraft, being the kind of revolutionary she was, or the radical thinker she was, she wanted to say that if parents are imposing wrong kind of education, if they are imposing wrong views, everybody, all the children, I mean, irrespective of gender, they should be questioning, and women should do all the more, because they are the primary targets, they are the primary recipients, and they are the primary victims. So why is it that they should be made to always made to instruct, or they would be instructed to follow whatever the parental authority is important, definitely, but blind submission is something which should be discarded, which should be questioned, which should be contested. Yes. Tonma, the next slide, please. And then she also refers to Mrs. Chapon's letters on the improvement of the mind. And she says that these are the, specifically mentions Mrs. Chapon and Catherine Macaulay, who had also written. And she says that these are the two authors who have not been acknowledged, who have not been properly recognized, because they have written really good stuff, but then they have not been recognized in the public realm, they have not been properly acknowledged, they have been ignored. And their writings also proves, as she says, was a proof that a woman can acquire judgment in the full extent of the word. So their writings actually prove that if woman is given the right kind of orientation, if she is given the right kind of education, then she can make meaningful contribution, she can intervene meaningfully, she can be a useful participant in public politics, in public decision, in for policy making, and also it will be a more kind of a holistic kind of a society, instead of you ignore one sex completely, one gender completely, and you just promote the other gender. So this is something which is unacceptable, and which will not lead us anywhere. So she says that, and she also responds to Lord Chesterfield, who had talked about emphasis on early education, but Chesterfield had specifically mentioned male education. Now she says that it's not just about male education, definitely education should start at an early age, but then it should be also provided to men and women alike. I mean, both of them should be the recipients. And she was all supporter of co-education, co-schooling, and that they should be joining the school together. There should not be a women's school, and there should not be a men's school. There should be a proper kind of interaction, integration, symbiosis in the relationship between a man and a woman. And she says that if you look at the overall view about education, overall take on Wollstonecraft's education, or her views about education, she says that yes, institutional educations are important, education is important, the schools should be set up, public education is important, but more than that, women and men, they should be allowed to go out, venture out, they should be playing physically, they should be enabling themselves. And it's also about learning lessons from life, instead of just getting just certain kinds of bookish knowledge from institution. It should also be a kind of a proper integration, a beautiful blending of the two, where you learn things from your surrounding, from your immediate environment, and also from schools. So there should be a kind of an integration, there should be a kind of a fine balance between the two. So she says that experiential wisdom and institutional wisdom, there should be a kind of a proper kind of a synthesis, a proper blending, a proper fusion. And then only both men and women, they can be the proper recipients of education, and they can become meaningful citizens in a nation. So these are her views, which she is incorporated in chapter 5, specifically because our discussion has been around chapter 5. But overall, the book is about the moral education. It's about different kinds of branches of discipline, and how women should not be denied, and how women should be made or given the chance to educate themselves, and it should not be just public education for men. It should be for both the sexes. So this is where I end my discussion today. Now, if you have anything to uh, add, or if you have anything to respond, please feel free to. I'll try my best to respond to your queries, or if you have anything, or if you want to add also, I might also know from you if I have you know I mean, in the course of my discussion, if something has intrigued you, or something which you have uh, you want to respond to. Yes, কিছু জিজ্ঞেস করার আছে? তন্ময়?
দিদি,
হ্যাঁ, স্টুডেন্টসদের আমি জানি না, দে মাইট বি ফিলিং শাই অলসো। মানে আমরাও তো আমাদের নতুন কোনো কেউ আসলে চট করে কিছু জিজ্ঞেস করাটা একটু অনেক সময় ইট বিকামস আ লিটল ডিফিকাল্ট। আমি ভাবছিলাম যে ওদের কিছু জিজ্ঞেস করার কিছু আছে কি, বা কিছু বলার থাকলে দে ক্যান আস্ক। I'll be happy to respond.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
After Me Too movement, has any feminism movement has started after that?
Uh, Me too. Yeah, I mean, this is again another very interesting, topic that you have raised. Me too টা তো basically primarily social media তে mainly হয়েছে. It had happened. Feminism, feminist thinkers, if you look at, even in the context of India also, they have responded to Me Too movement in different ways. Some of them have endorsed. They said that, it should happen. Women should be given the chance to speak. But then there are other thinkers and critics who have criticized Me Too movement. Surprisingly, they have criticized. They're saying that it has become a kind of a fashionable kind of uh, a kind of a trend or a practice, and women who had should have spoken during that time, 10 years, 15 years after things have passed. Sometimes it is also a kind of a ploy to frame unnecessarily somebody who has not been a real offender, but framing somebody because it is also being endorsed or being supported by a larger powerful group. So there are different ways of looking at Me Too movement. Me Too movement নিয়ে প্রচুর কন্ট্রোভার্সি, প্রচুর ডিবেটস হয়েছে। এই মুহূর্তে কি হচ্ছে আমি ঠিক বলতে পারছি না, তবে there have been different kinds of debates and counter debates. There had, যদি বলো যে ফেমিনিস্ট মুভমেন্ট আলাদা করে, সেরকম করে আলাদা ফেমিনিস্ট মুভমেন্ট শুরু হয়নি, কিন্তু রেসপন্ডিং টু মি টু মুভমেন্ট অনেক রকমের কথাবার্তা হয়েছে, অনেক ধরনের ক্রিটিসিজমও হয়েছে মি টু মুভমেন্ট নিয়ে।
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
হ্যাঁ, হোয়াট ডু ইউ থিঙ্ক? সন্দীপ জিজ্ঞেস করলে না, তোমার কি মনে হয়? হোয়াট ডু ইউ থিঙ্ক অ্যাবাউট ইট?
No, ma'am. I don't know the current affairs. Hence, I'm asking you.
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, মানে ঠিক আছে, বুঝতে পেরেছি। আচ্ছা, আর কিছু জিজ্ঞেস করার আছে? উড ইউ লাইক টু আস্ক? তোমরা কি সবাই মেদিনীপুরেই, মানে ইন এন্ড অ্যারাউন্ড ওখানেই বেসড, না আরো বাইরেরও কেউ আছো?
সব মেদিনীপুরই দিদি।
সব মিদনাপুরের না? আচ্ছা আচ্ছা।
মেয়েদের তরফ থেকে কোনো কোশ্চেন এখনো পাইনি আমরা। সো
I think they are trying to formulate the question, perhaps. থাকলে জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারো, without hesitation.
অর্পিতা, any question do you have?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, so as they don't have any question right now,
Okay, okay.
if they later on, if any questions comes to their mind, so
Yeah, yeah,
I
sure,
will ask
sure,
them
sure.
to
I'd be happy to
uh,
answer.
pass those questions to me, and I will
আমি
pass to you.
শিলংয়ে পড়াই, তো আমার শিলংয়ের স্টুডেন্টরাও দে আর ইনিশিয়ালি একটা রেটিসেন্স থাকে, জট করে কোয়েশ্চেন জিজ্ঞেস করে না, পরে অনেক সময় পরে জিজ্ঞেস করে। তো আই নো, আই মিন স্টুডেন্টস একটু টাইম লাগে অনেক সময়, আমাদের নিজেদেরও শাইনেস ছিল আমরা ওয়েন উই ওয়ার স্টুডেন্টস। আর এখন তো সবাই এই অনলাইন অফলাইন করে করেই ওদের হয়রান হয়ে যাচ্ছে।
So thank you, Di. Now I request Orpita to give Didi the vote of thanks, formal vote of thanks. Orpita, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Good
please.
afternoon, ma'am. I'm Urpita Jana from PG First Sim, Midnapur College Autonomous, and I, on behalf on my entire department, would like to extend a hearty vote of thanks to the Honorable Delegate Dr. Suranjana Chowdhury for delivering such a worthy and mesmerizing lecture. Thank you so much again, ma'am.
Thanks, Orpita, for formally thanking me, and thanks to Tonmoy also. As I say, that it's always good to meet young minds. We teachers look forward to interacting with new, fresh young minds, and I hope that if you have any questions, you can always pass on the questions to your Tanmoy sir. He can. We are in touch regularly in touch. So if you have anything related to the particular text, you can ask. I'll be happy to help you. So thank you all,
Okay, okay,
and
Di.
yes,
Thank you once again.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, all of you. Have a good
Thank
day.
you, ma'am.
Okay, bye bye.